I've seen a lot of people online struggling to understand Nen, so with Hunter x Hunter returning in a couple of months, I thought it might be helpful to make a video explaining it, and if you have any questions by the end of the video, I will answer them in the comments below. Let's get started with the basics. Aura is the life force produced by all living things. It is needed to live, and the majority of people produce it without even knowing they are. To be a Nen user, you have to be capable of controlling this life force. This skill is usually learned through meditation and slowly gaining control of your aura, but you can also gain control of your aura by having your aura nodes forced open by another Nen user. Once your pores are open, you must learn the 4 basic tenets of Nen. The first tenet is Ten. Ten is the ability to prevent your Nen from escaping your body. This is an important step because it is necessary for the next 3 tenets, and because if you do not keep your aura close to your body, you will pass out from exhaustion. Ten is also the first defense against hostile Nen attacks, but it doesn't do much for physical defense. Keeping one's body enveloped in their aura via Ten can also reduce aging, which is probably why Netero still looks so youthful at like 110 years old. Next is Zetsu. Zetsu is the ability to close all the aura nodes on your body, effectively cutting off any Nen from leaking out. This makes your presence much harder to detect, and Zetsu can be used to counter more advanced Nen techniques that we'll talk about later. Zetsu can also relieve fatigue as it prevents any aura from leaking out of the body. Unlike Ten, Zetsu does have a couple of drawbacks. First of all, it leaves you vulnerable to all Nen attacks, as you have no way of protecting your body from Nen. On top of this, hiding your presence can tip off a high-level Nen user that there is another Nen user as well. This is simply because they will notice your Nen disappearing. The third tenet is Ren. Ren is when you output a high amount of aura at once. It gives the user enhanced strength and durability at the cost of using a large amount of aura. Ren can be trained to increase the amount of time you can spend in Ren. This training will also increase the amount of aura at one's disposal. Ren is also used as a quantifier for strength throughout the show, as the ability is a good way to show how much aura you can produce or show how strong you are. By putting hostility behind your Ren, it can give others a sense of dread and even kill people if they are not Nen users. The final tenet is Hatsu. Hatsu is basically the expression of one's Nen, and it is where we see people developing their own abilities. These abilities can be almost anything, but they usually depend on a person's Nen affiliation, which we'll talk about in a little bit. Before we get too deep into Hatsu or the Nen tree, I want to cover the advanced techniques that we learn about during the Greed Island arc. They're all universal, so I think it's important to understand them before we get into the depths of Nen. Each advanced technique uses at least one of the 4 basic tenets to create special effects. The first and most prominent is Gyo. Gyo is when Ren is applied to a specific area of your body. We see it used almost exclusively on the eyes, but it can be used elsewhere as well. This will increase the amount of aura in one body part, making it stronger. When applied to the eyes, it allows the user to see concealed Nen abilities and trace amounts of aura that might have been missed otherwise. Using this ability will leave some areas more vulnerable because of the concentration of Nen on a specific body part. Next is In. In allows you to make your Nen unnoticeable, similar to the effects of Zetsu. However, unlike Zetsu, In does not stop the flow of aura. This makes the Nen imperceivable to the 5 senses. In can also be used to conceal the user's presence or objects constructed by the user's aura. This technique can be countered by Gyo. Following In, we have En. This technique is an application of Ten and Ren. It allows its users to feel the movement and shape of anything within their aura bubble. To be considered En, the radius of the bubble has to be at least 2 meters. Masters of Nen who studied En can hold this bubble to a diameter of 50 meters. But there are exceptions, such as Xenozolgic, whose En has a diameter of 300 meters, and Pitu, whose Nen was extremely large and irregularly shaped. The fourth advanced technique is Shu. Shu is a technique that we do not see a lot of throughout the show. It is when Ten is used to cover an object in the user's aura, and the user can then use that object as an extension of their body. This also protects the object with the aura and makes it stronger in accordance to the strength of the aura. The fifth technique is Ko. This technique is a combination of Ten, Zetsu, Ren, Hatsu, and Gyo. That's a lot. To use Ko, you need to concentrate your aura into one part of your body using Gyo. Then you must use Ten to prevent the aura from dissipating, and Zetsu to cut off the aura from the rest of your body, in order to give you more aura to concentrate in that one area. And finally, you must use Ren to increase the aura even further. depending on the nen user, they can apply their Hatsu to this area as well. This makes that one part of the body extremely powerful offensively and defensively, but it leaves the rest of the body completely vulnerable. We can see this in use by Phaeton and Gon. Next is Ken. This is the main training method used to strengthen one's Ren, as it combines both Ten and Ren to keep the aura close to the body and powerful. Ken also allows the users to defend against attacks from any direction, but it is tiring to maintain due to the large amount of aura required. Ken is considered a good defense against Ko, or when the user wants to be cautious. The last advanced technique is Ryu. Ryu combines Gyo and Ken to manipulate the amount of aura around your body in specific areas. This will allow you to adapt offensively and defensively, as you can change the areas that have more aura depending on where you think you will be hit or what limb you plan on using to hit your opponent. This is an extremely complex technique as it requires complete mastery of one's aura and the ability to change aura concentrations very quickly. The last thing I want to talk about before we get into Hatsu is conditions. Conditions are a method of placing special properties on an ability at the cost of a restriction. This allows the user to create abilities that are multiple times stronger than the ability would have been without the restriction. However, they now need to abide to the restriction, which can be pretty much anything. From a punishment from using the ability on the wrong person, to only being able to use the ability in a certain environment, even having to accomplish a set of goals before the ability can be activated. An example of an ability with a condition is Chrollo's skill Hunter. Chrollo needs to fulfill 4 different conditions before he can steal someone's Nen. This is because stealing Nen is a fairly powerful technique, and as such it requires restrictions. Okay, let's finally get into Hatsu. Every Nen user has the ability to develop their own unique abilities. They can be completely original or they can copy someone else, but these abilities are best when they are created by the individual for that individual. The more an ability aligns with a user's personality, the stronger it will be and the more easily they will be able to use it. Basically, the more an ability is true to oneself, the stronger it will be. When determining which kind of ability to develop, Nen users are placed into one of 6 categories. These are Enhancement, Emission, Transmutation, Manipulation, Conjuration, and Specialization. This categorization is usually done via water divination, but there are other pseudoscience methods to determine a Nen affiliation, such as Hisoka's personality test. While all Nen users are placed into a specific category, they can still use aspects from other categories in their Nen abilities. The closer a category is to their own, the more they will be able to master that category's abilities. They will be able to master their inherent ability up to 100%, and each ability away will lose 20% effectiveness. The one caveat is that no one can use the specialist category except a specialist. This would seem like it places manipulators and conjurers at a disadvantage, but it really doesn't, because they are more likely to become specialists later in life. So let's look at an example. A transmutation user can use transmutation abilities up to 100%. They can use enhancement and conjuration abilities up to 80%, emission at 60%, specialization at 0%, and manipulation at 40%. I'm going to talk more about some abilities that have this kind of overlap later in the video. So while we're on the subject of transmuters, what is a transmuter ability? Well, the reason there are 6 categories is because each category can manipulate their Nen in a different way. Enhancers specialize in taking their physical enhancements to the max. This gives them great offensive, defensive, and healing capabilities. They can do this by developing their own Hatsu or just by training their Ren to the max, because it would naturally increase their defense and offense. Master enhancers are often more durable than even the most advanced tanks, but they tend to have more basic abilities such as a really strong punch. This is mostly because they don't need a complex ability, as their ability is to be naturally defensive and offensive. Prominent examples of enhancers are Gon and Uvo. Transmuters can take their aura and change the properties of how it works. They can make it mimic something that already exists, such as electricity, or be unique, such as having the properties of both rubber and gum. The ability to change the shape of one's aura is also a transmuter ability. The most notable transmuters in the show are Killua and Hisoka. Emitters can detach aura from their bodies much more easily than any other category. This detachment of aura can last longer and last over long distances while still maintaining its special effects. Some basic applications would be shooting a projectile of aura at high speeds or propelling oneself with aura. Some more advanced applications would be teleportation and allowing aura to phase through non-living matter. Some prominent examples of emitters are Leorio and Razor. Conjuration is the ability to create objects out of aura. The user can create and dispel conjured items at will, and the strength of the conjured item is generally tied to the user's skill. But conjurers cannot create items that are stronger than what a human could make, so they cannot make a shield that is unbreakable or a sword that can cut through anything. While this is a drawback, it can be easily circumvented by placing conditions on the conjured object. Restrictions can also be used to give conjured items special abilities. For example, Kurapika has created a chain that is nearly unbreakable via his chain jail, but to get it to that point he had to place a condition on the chain that he will only use it on members of the Phantom Troop. He also placed a condition on himself that if he uses this chain on anyone that is not a member of the Phantom Troop, he will die. Conjurers can also imbue their conjured items with any of the advanced techniques we talked about before, so they can create an invisible weapon using In, or a normal weapon shrouded in Shu, which would make it slightly stronger. But it is important to remember the item itself is not getting stronger, it is the Nen that is stronger around it. Conjurers can also create independent constructs out of Nen, but this requires a lot of investment into manipulation if you want to actually control them. Conjurers can also change their body into vehicles. This is pretty rare and it usually requires a second person to control the vehicle and contribute their own aura to power it. Next is manipulation. Manipulators have the ability to control objects and people with their Nen. Most of the manipulators we see control people as it is a much more useful and dangerous ability. In combat, manipulators only need to fulfill their conditions to win, as afterwards their opponent is under their complete control. However, you don't just get omnipotent control. The degree of control is dependent on the conditions. The more conditions, the more control. The degree of control is also dependent on how much Nen you put into manipulation. For example, Shalnark is only able to control one person at a time, but he is able to control them at a high degree, including their speech and high motor functions. Whereas Illumi can control a lot of people at once, but they really only understand basic commands. The degree of control can also be influenced by the type of mind control that is occurring. There's coercive, which is complete control, pseudo-coercive, where the victim is trapped in a situation where they don't have any choices, solicitation, where the manipulator is asking for assistance before taking over, and diffusive induction, which is basically hypnosis. The last category is specialization. A specialist has an ability that does not fall into any of the other categories. Specialists usually develop from extreme circumstances or from some kind of genetic disposition, but people can also transition into specialists later in life depending on what they go through. Because of this, specialists have a wide range of abilities, and they can be extremely useful in combat or extremely useful in specific situations. Most of the Nen geniuses we see throughout the show fall into this category. Nen geniuses are people that are using Nen in their everyday life without knowing they're doing so. For example, Komugi or Neon. The most notable trained specialists are Crollo, Neferpitu, Meruem, and Kurapika when his eyes are red. I think what makes Nen complicated is the amount of extra information we get and how abilities overlap. You can still understand Nen without understanding what Knuckle is talking about with his APP, OPP, AOP, whatever. It's not that important to understanding Nen itself, just his ability. It's basically just arbitrary numbers that he has assigned to himself for the sake of his ability. Hopefully this video gave you a better idea of how Nen works in Hunter x Hunter. If you have any questions at all, please be sure to let me know in the comments down below and I will answer them to the best of my ability. Thank you for watching, please subscribe, and I'll see you again next week.